Hey, welcome back. For today's video I want to focus on something a little bit more foreign. In light of recent changes making PvP a little bit better, as well as the addition of medal weeklies on Rifting, open world PvP has been gaining in popularity. Now, before anybody starts madly typing in the comments about how cooked PvP is or how miserable that class feels, we will get around to addressing these topics in a future video. There is a lot I want to talk about in regards to the broad topic of balance, but that is a subject I am keeping after the launch of Season 2. As we already know, a lot of changes are coming alongside it. For now, I would like to look at the current state of open world PvP in itself, as in the maps, the appeals, its failing, and its successes. This video will be split into two parts, with the first one focusing on Rifting, and the second one focusing on the Abyss. First, let's start with Rifting PvP. In its current state, Rift PvP has gained traction again thanks to the addition of new weeklies, requiring you to hunt the enemy both in your own turf and in the enemy territory. This was a fantastic addition that brought back much needed life into this content. That being said, there is one blatant flaw. The original design of Rifting was meant to match that of the original AION. You see, in AION 1, Rifting was a PvPvE activity. There were several objectives across the map, be it leveling, gathering, doing dailies, hunting rare spawns, and so on and so forth. AION 2 initially took a similar approach in that regard, until the addition of the PvP and PvE flag. Nowadays, someone who is just looking to get any of these activities done will just flag to PvE, in order to avoid being bothered, which immediately removed the carrot on a stick forcing people to wander alone in the wilderness and encounter spontaneous PvP. As a result, people flagging for PvP have a common understanding that PvP will basically only happen at a specific hotspot, that being the main hub and its surroundings, leading to Rifting becoming a glorified Zerg PvP and rendering 99% of the map useless. How do we fix that? The answer is by incentivizing roaming around the map once again. One of the first obvious changes would be to give special perks to the PvP flag in itself during Rifting hours. One perk could be to increase the amount of souls earned by killing monsters in the field. This would immediately turn popular pet farming spots, like for example Immortal Island, into PvP hotspots. I would even go one step further in basically giving the same perk as farming monsters in the Abyss, with the Kina earned not counting towards the Kina cap, perhaps adding a small AP rewards, and the ability to drop asphalt board and silver metal fragments. Another perk could be to provide additional rewards when opening cubes, encouraging people to hunt them while flagged and roam around the map, or to even spawn special cubes during Rifting hours that can only be opened by PvP flagged players. Another change could be to fundamentally change how world bosses function. These were initially designed as another PvPe element, but have since completely lost their point after the addition of the PvE flag, as well as their removal from the daily contracts. My personal suggestion would be to make them spawn exclusively during Rift timings at certain intervals, and to change their rewards into a box given to anybody who contributed to their defeat, with the box differing based on your currently active flag. PvE flag players would receive a box containing regular consumables, Allied Bolt fragments, regular mana stones, while PvP flag players would receive Abyss consumables, Asphalt Bolt fragments, and PvP mana stones. These changes alone would likely improve things a lot, but I would even go a few extra steps further. First, let's take a look at guards. These were initially added before the addition of the PvP flag. They made some amount of sense then. However, with the addition of the flag, the overwhelming majority of them have no reasons to exist. Keeping a few in immediate vicinity of obelisks and town facilities makes sense, but the random patrols and instance protectors need to go. Indeed, there's nothing to protect here. Someone who doesn't want to encounter PvP would not be PvP flagged to begin with. The way guards fundamentally function is also a bit weird. In AION 1, they were mostly intended to be disruptive, CCing you when you aggroed them and dealing reasonable amounts of damage. In AION 2, however, the moment one of them latches onto you, they unleash their Biden blast and pulverize your entire life, often one-shotting you. Also, in AION 1, damage done by a guard took away from the AP given and lost. In AION 2, a guard death will fully reward the last player that hit you. This incentivizes people to camp inside of guards and pull people inside of them, which isn't a good thing. Changes are needed. Next, we can also take a look at methods AION 1 used to encourage people to roam the maps. One of the most popular ones were camps. Camps were basically like small fortresses that you could capture, and were placed all over the map. Capturing a camp spawned an NPC inside of it for your faction that handed quests that would ask you to kill a few monsters in a given area, often rewarding things like medals for PvP gear. I think there is room to add something like that in AION 2 as well. You could have encampments all across the map that could default to be owned by below outside of Rifting hours and become capturables when rifts are open. And finally, perhaps a bit more controversial of a change would be to stagger the rift spawns. By that, I mean having rift spawns for one faction after another, in order to focus the population towards one map at a time and avoid spreading the player thin. For example, having the rift spawn on the Asmo side leading towards the Ilios side at 4 PM and rift spawning on the Ilios side leading to the Asmodean side at 7 PM, with a 1-hour break after that. Also, whenever more Heim and Eltnerd come out, I would also suggest to have the maps rotate their rifting availability every week, in order to avoid spreading the rifting population into 4 maps. Next, let's take a look at the Abyss. First, let's tackle a problem NC has already attempted to fix: camping. Their solution was to add guards alongside all of the rings leading to the central platform, but that quite frankly not only did not fix the problem, that also added another problem, with people just camping inside of the NPCs to pull people inside of them. My solution would be as follows. First, shift some of the islands closer to the side of the spawn. Then, add speed flight rings to each side, in order to give 3 possible exit points from the spawn. This is pretty similar to how it works in AION 1. Next, remove the guards alongside the central path and only have them be placed at the exit rings. The next problem to tackle is the ease at which people escape during battles in the Abyss. First, let's address the wing dropping. That exact problem also existed in AION 1, and is honestly quite difficult to tackle. AION 2 already partially addressed it by having your wings automatically reopen if you get hit right after dropping them, but that unfortunately isn't enough. One solution could be to make it so your flight time drains rapidly during freefall if you're currently in combat, making it so you just drop to your death with no option to reopen your wings if you attempt to do so. Another problem are people exiting the Abyss maps and using return scrolls while freefalling or running away. One solution could be to only allow either of these to be used when inside of the base camp. While on the topic of flight, a lot of classes also have a drastic disadvantage in the air due to it not being possible to dodge while flying. This is a bit of a silly problem, as all they have to do was to make the dash work the same as on the ground while in combat. It does feel more deliberate, but I do think they should bring back dodging in combat even when in flight. Next, let's address the flight rings themselves. While these feel good to use, they are pretty problematic in practice. During a chase, someone using them immediately makes them disappear out of sight due to the rendering distance. They also allow ranged players to gain a huge advantage over melees by just continuously taking them while continuing to attack the other player. I think the solution to this would be to make every flight ring, except the one at the base camp exits, and perhaps one on each side of the Abyss, only give you flight time without a speed boost, similar to the flight rings in the Shugo minigame. Next, let's address world bosses, starting with the daily spawning ones. The current way Argos and Kyref function is that they spawn every 12 hours based on the last server restart time. This makes their respawn time hard to track, especially given they immediately die upon respawning due to their low health. Additionally, their current reward structure is purely DPS contribution based, awarding medals based on your contribution, and with too low of a contribution earning you nothing. This is pretty bad, as it heavily punishes support classes and newer players. The very obvious solution here is to make them daily spawns at fixed hours, namely during rift downtimes, and at the very least have the first step of rewards be awarded as long as you hit the boss once, while also dramatically increasing their health. Personally, I would also have both of them spawn simultaneously on opposite end of the map, in order to give both factions a chance at least earning rewards from one of them. Now, with that said, there is another world boss, and that would be Nama. Nama has a fixed spawn on Sunday and rewards everyone who did it at least once with 2 silver medals, thanks to the seasonal tied to it, found here. This is already leagues better than the other spawns, but is not without its flaws. First, once again, the boss dies insanely fast, and second, the game is clearly not meant to support this kind of player loads in the same location. We are talking about thousands upon thousands of players from each faction beating up a tiny dragon on a given island. Obviously, if you're going to have events of this scale, the game should support it better, but there are also other steps you can take to make it more bearable. First, make the boss bigger, and expand its hitbox to be hittable from much further away, including my melees, and make that specific boss render at a longer distance and be targetable from further away, a bit like Sunayaka in AION 1. This should help players spread more evenly. Next, there should be some element of randomness to the spawn location. Currently, the boss always spawns in the same location. This results in people crowding that area preemptively to start spamming attacks before it even spawns. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about spawning it from one end or the other end of the Abyss, but within the central island have it spawn in a few different areas. And last, and maybe most obviously, increase its health dramatically. I would also suggest the event taking more of a multi-step kind of angle, like for example spawning fleets of enemy before it, or having towers that make the main boss invulnerable also spawn alongside it and require to be destroyed before hitting the main boss. Having an important 1 per week kind of event like this and within 5 seconds really isn't acceptable. And on a similar topic, I would also have the artifact siege take on a similar route. Make them bigger, give them more health, give them a better reward structure, and most of all, give them a fixed schedule, please. Finally, I would introduce more of a PvPvE element to the day-to-day Abyss experience to encourage people to roam the area. For example, having certain islands become frenzied at certain times, with faster monster respawn and drop rates. Or having the PvP cubes mentioned in Rifting earlier also spawn in the Abyss at certain times. And that would be it for today's video. Before we go, I have a few words to give you guys as we're heading into Season 2. My driving force with this channel is to provide informative and engaging content on AION 2. I was, quite frankly, very saddened at the current state of content creation for us in the West with that game, as the overwhelming majority of it was either absolute slop or bad faith content, with very little pertaining to actual topics relevant to the game itself. Now, any content creators worth its salt would tell you that going as hard as I that currently I am making content in English for a game that won't be out in the West for like half a year, that probably isn't the smartest idea in the world, and they would probably be right. That being said, my first goal here isn't necessarily to make money or become big, but rather to provide something of substance to people who actually like the game or want to get into the game, as well as a platform to discuss about it without having constant onslaughts of dead horses and low-hanging fruits. Obviously, if all of this ends up working out and becoming bigger than I initially anticipated, that would mean that I could obviously pour even more of my time into it, which I would love to do. We'll see what tomorrow is made of. Now, all this to say, I am grateful that you guys have been enjoying what I've been able to make, and I hope you will continue to do so. Now, here's a question for you. Going into Season 2, I initially did not really intend on making guide videos on things like the new dungeons, but rather just upload clear videos with guides staying focused on stuff like Sanctuary. With that said, would you like it for me to also make guide for Conquest and Transcendence dungeons? Let me know in the comments. As always, I also stream this game several times a week on both YouTube and Twitch, so make sure to swing by and say hi. I have also opened a community Discord for this channel. The link will be in the description below. Until next time, take care.